For the sake of this video, would you like to state your full name?
Lincoln Hooper.
How did you end up in Cape Cod?
I was born and raised here.
Nice. What made you think of joining the military?
I was not a very good student. My grades were marginal at best, and I didn't have a lot of options. So quite frankly, I went in the military more out of needing a job and some direction in my life than I was out of patriotism. At that time in 1985, when I graduated high school, there were no wars going on in the world. There was no prospect of any wars. So it was more out of a job and get some training for me, some life training, some skills, that type of thing.
Would you like to describe how the weather was where your service was?
The weather, I served a bunch of different places. I went in the Air Force, so that's basic training was Lackland Air Force Base. Not the smartest move in the world to go to Lackland on June 6, 1985. It was rather hot and very humid, and it really was a different environment. From there, I went to Denver, Colorado, which is somewhat like here. Then upstate New York, Plattsburgh Air Force Base, and where I spent a year. I met my current wife there, and then I spent 2 years in South Korea at Suwon Air Base, South Korea.
What did you do at South Korea?
Whatever the service told me to do. Actually, I went in the service, and my AFC was to work with munitions, different types of munitions, guidance systems, propulsion, a bunch of different things. I ultimately ended up in storage and handling, where I got my tractor trailer license. I got licenses to run heavy equipment and cranes and stuff like that, which is what I did for a living when I got out of the service.
Would you like to describe how you felt when you came back home?
I came back home. Well, I'd been in South Korea for 2 years, and I never took a vacation, so I had missed being here. We all take for granted that we live very well in this society. When you go live in another country for a year or two, when you are the foreigner, it's a different animal. It really opens your eyes and makes you appreciate living here.
Mm-hmm. So what was the scariest moment?
The scariest moment? In what way?
Like, while doing your job?
While doing my job. Okay, we did, we used Mark 82s when I was in upstate New York in Plattsburgh Air Force Base, which are 500-pound bombs. And these bombs, you put them on a flatbed and you strap them down. Well, unfortunately, we were on a little bit of an incline, and we were doing this, and we had a bomb fall off the back of the truck. That was pretty scary. Now, it was not fused, so it should not go off. There's like you have a small charge, a bigger charge, and a bigger charge that then lights the bomb off, makes the bomb go off. So it's the likelihood that it would go off was pretty low, but dropping a piece of munitions off of a flatbed truck like that big was pretty scary. That was very scary.
Describe what you would do in a casual day.
In a casual day. Well, part of the reason I got out of the service was because I did not like my stateside duty very much. Although I get to play with tractor trailers and front end loaders and stuff, there wasn't a lot of work. It was more hanging out and playing AC/DC or pool or darts like that, and then rush, because some general was going to be visiting and paint the grass green type of thing. When I went overseas, we went from, so I would say in an average day stateside, if I worked 2 or 3 hours in a day, actually 2 or 3 hours of labor, that was probably average. When I went overseas, we worked 10-hour days, and when I say worked, I mean we worked 10-hour days. You worked hard, you played hard, and what I really missed the most is the camaraderie that you develop under those circumstances. I felt none of it when I was stationed stateside, because everybody at the end of the day would scatter and go to their lives. Overseas, there was nowhere to go. I was a big Korean base, but it was a small American base. There was about 900 Americans deployed there for the A-10 Warhogs. And yeah, there we worked hard and we played hard. But it felt like family more than it just, everybody scattering at the end of the day.
So you said you played pool and stuff like that. Like, how would you describe the friendship in Air Force?
Well, not much of it, overseas is a whole different animal, and I liked my time overseas, even though it was exponentially harder. Harder at work, it was harder because you have no family, it was harder on a number of levels. And there was no Americans to go and socialize with other than the people you worked with. So it kind of brought people closer together, and you had that camaraderie. So yeah, I learned to play a lot. I played a lot of pool, a lot of darts. Yeah, that was it. I also played a fair amount of basketball when I was in the service too, to stay busy.
So what do you think your parents thought of you when you tried to join military?
They didn't think much of it, even though my father had served in the Navy himself. Neither of my parents would sign me up. So when I turned 18, halfway through my senior year in high school, I went and signed up delayed enlistment, and neither one of them approved. But I didn't ask their permission.
So did you want to come back to Cape Cod, or did you want to go somewhere else?
No, I chose to come back here. I was born and raised here. I think it's the best place to live, bar none. The Cape, since I was a boy, is quadrupled in population. We're transitioning to more of a resort community and second homeowners and vacation than we were when I was a boy. So the only constant here is change. That said, I still think it's a wonderful place to raise a family. I think it's a wonderful place to work and live, and I feel very fortunate to be able to have done so.
Would you like to describe how it felt the first day? How did you feel from the beginning to the end? Like the difference
You're looking for a comparison between my first day in the service and the last day?
Yep.
That's quite the contrast. Well, you go in, I was 18 years old, not having a clue what to expect, and it was a very long day going to the MEP Center in Boston. And they stick you on a plane, you fly down to Lackland Air Force Base, you get off, and they take everything you came with and strip you of your identity and shave your head and issue you everything from underwear to your uniforms, and I was a shock. That basic training comes off as a shock to one system. In the Air Force, it was only 6 weeks, so it flew by. It was over before you know it, but just apprehensive about the whole thing, not knowing what to expect, not really having a clue. Since I had spent 2 years in South Korea, just shy of 2 years, I had saved up my vacation time. You get 30 days a year vacation. I hadn't taken any. I didn't feel like coming home, and because it's a long airplane ride. So I saved it up to put it on when I got out. I enjoyed that feeling of getting out. That was a feeling of elation. And the service was just this kind of presents somewhat of a dichotomy in that when I was in, I couldn't say much good about it, and then when I was out, I really can't say much bad about it. But yeah, getting out is a whole different. I was excited, looking forward to it. Got to turn in my like my chem warfare stuff and not have to participate in that because they give you a couple weeks to out process. Yeah, I remember being short. You call it being short, and I was short and enjoyed that very much. Plus, I had got my wife Mary and I had met when I was stationed in upstate New York, and then I got orders to go over overseas. I lived over there for about 4 or 5 months, and I spent $600 buying a plane ticket, which $600 was a lot of money when I'm making like $5 an hour or something back then. And I sent her a plane ticket, and she came over, and we got married overseas. She spent a year there, and then she went to a year of law school on Long Island at Delphi University. So I hadn't seen her for 6 months, 7 months, something like that. So it, again, on a number of levels, getting out was very exciting.
Why did you agree to do this interview?
You're leaving? Can you stop this for a second, kid?
Would you like to would you like to continue on that?
On what?
On what we were doing? On
Well, I was talking about my elation of getting out of the service. I don't know what more to talk about. I mean, it was being isolated from this country for 2 years, and then having my wife be gone for, I think it was like 6 or 7 months that I hadn't seen her. So my parents actually came to the airport along with my wife, and my parents didn't even recognize me. I walked right by them. I remember this vividly. I walked right by them, and my wife obviously did, and her and I were embraced in a hug, and my parents are still looking through the people that are walking off the plane for me. But yeah, it was good. It was a good feeling to get out. I mean, very seldom do people get out from overseas. They usually come back and extend for a year or re-enlist, because how do you line a job up from being overseas? I had no such reservations. I knew I could find employment in one form or another, so I didn't hesitate. I just simply said, I'm doing my time and I'm getting out, which is exactly what I did.
So how far of a level did you go to?
What do you mean?
Like,
Rank?
yes.
I was an E4, which is a senior airman. I qualified for a line number for staff, but because I did not go to NCO school, non-commissioned officer school, because I knew I was getting out. I was as certain as I was going in. I knew I was only doing 4 years, and it was not for me, and I was getting out. So I did not take the normal path. I took testing, but I did not go to this 2-week class where they make you go and play soldier, essentially, military customs and courtesies, so that I could sew the rank on. There was no pay differential. It was simply a senior airman to a sergeant was no pay at the time, so why bother? And if I knew I was getting out, why bother going to that class? So I even though I tested well and got a line number for staff, everyone called me crazy for wanting to get out at that point in time and said, you got staff in 4 years. What kid? What are you doing? You got to stay in. No, I don't.
So what's your current job?
I am the DPW director for the town of Harwich.
Cool. So how was the food that you got in the Air Force?
We ate very well. I have to say, the Air Force, unlike all the other branches, has civilians prepare your food, civilians serve it to you, civilians clear off your table when you're done eating. All the other branches, you do that yourself. I've been to other bases, and I know that. We live very, very well in the Air Force relative to the other three branches of the service. The food was excellent, honestly. It was kind of a highlight. Mary and I, when we were in South Korea, I did not have enough rank to have a car, so we had to walk everywhere we wanted to go or take a bus. We would walk about 40 minutes to get to the base, and then walk on the base to get to the chow hall. And we would go over there Sunday mornings almost religiously, because they had the best omelets I've ever had to this day. We ate very well in the service.
So why did you agree to do this interview?
Because Jared asked me to. Your friend.
So how many places did you go? Like, did you move a lot?
Not a whole lot. So I got, do you want to count TDYs, temporary duty stations, or just permanent
Yeah,
duty
we will.
stations? All right, so basic training was Lackland Air Force Base. Then I went to 5 months at Lowry Air Force Base in downtown Denver, Colorado. Then I went to Plattsburgh Air Force Base, upstate New York. Then before they sent me to Suwon Air Base, South Korea, they sent me TDY to learn a couple of different systems, munition systems, and I went to 3 different bases, and I'm not going to remember what the bases were, but I had one in North Carolina and 2 in California. One of them was Travis Air Force Base in California, and I don't remember what the other one was. So after I got those 3 TDYs done, then I went to Suwon Air Base, South Korea, where I stayed until I separated.
Cool. So what are some of the long-lasting effects from your job?
Long-lasting effects from my job.
Yes.
Well, I got a class back then, before they had CDL licenses. There used to be a class 1, 2, and 3. Class 1 was a tractor trailer license. I had a tractor trailer license from the Air Force that Massachusetts allowed me to just walk in, and they gave me a class 1. I had to take a written test, but not a road test, and they handed me a class 1 license, which then converted to the current CDL. So I got out of the service and was able to make a pretty decent living by driving tractor trailer truck and running heavy equipment, which is what I did in the service. So lasting effects. That, and I have now been married 32 years to the woman I met when I was stationed in upstate New York.
If you could change anything, what would you change?
What about my service?
Mm-hmm.
I have no regrets.
No regrets?
None. I think the service was good for me. I needed the discipline, I needed the structure, and I needed to learn some skills. So at least I was smart enough to know, although I was not very good at school, that I needed those things. And at 18 years old, I realized those, and I thought the service was going to be a decent fit. I didn't really take to the service stateside very much. I enjoyed my time in South Korea very, very much.
So would you like to go visit South Korea again, if you could?
No, I've done enough traveling. I don't really care if I go anywhere. I have another little story about South Korea. When I first got to South Korea, and I was, there 4 or 5 months, I started participating with some college students that were there, Korean college students that wanted to learn English a little better. And I developed a friendship with a woman named Unok, and she helped me get Mary over here. And then Mary and her became bestest friends. When Mary came back, she was always checking in on me and my buddy, because we partied and lived hard. And eventually, when she graduated college, her family wanted her to be married. And it's a very different, it's very different societally over there, meaning that the women walk behind the men, the women are subservient to men. And this woman was a very strong woman and wanted nothing to do with that. So she came and lived with us for a couple of years, and went to grad school here, and lived with us while she was doing that. And she eventually married an American man, and they settled in Connecticut, and we see them once or twice a year to this day. I think that was very fascinating that somebody I just simply met, became essentially lifelong friends with, a Korean national.
So did you celebrate holidays like Christmas?
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, yes, but all you have is your fellow co-workers for your family, which is different. I was very fortunate that Mary came over. I still think she's nuts for doing that, but she came over, and I was one of the few that had a wife there, that one of the only ones that had an American wife. So they would have had Korean nationals. I was very unique in that situation, that I had an American woman come over and live. Some of the guys would have their spouses or girlfriends come and visit them, but that a short visit, that really lended it to Mary kind of being the mother of my shop for the guys. So we would, when we got married over there, the base chaplain would not perform the ceremony unless we went through marriage counseling and 6 weeks of this course that they had put together, primarily for guys that were marrying Korean women. Try to, reconcile the cultural differences. Not applicable to us. Mary and I had already lived together for a year before I got my orders. So the guy was steadfast in his conviction that if we didn't do this, he wouldn't do a ceremony. So all we had for a wedding was my entire shop. About 15 guys came over to our apartment, and we sat around drinking a great deal. Was more or less my wedding.
So would you like to describe how the war, how the service changed your life?
Best thing I ever did was marry that woman out there. And I credit everything, nearly everything I've accomplished to her. I mean, she was the one that said, when I wasn't happy with my job, go to school. So I went to school nights, got an associate's degree. Got a small, a smaller promotion out of that. Decided to stay with the town, got turned down for my current job a couple of times. She again said, go back to school. And I went back to school and got my bachelor's degree and got my master's degree, and then I got promoted to my current position. And, I wouldn't have challenged myself in those avenues, particularly academia, had it not been for my wife.
So your spirit was kept up by your wife?
My spirit was kept. I'm not understanding your question.
Like during the service, when your wife came over, did that help you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Did it lift my spirits, did you mean, having her? And so, yes, I missed her tremendously. We had lived together for about a year. We hadn't, I gave her a ring before I left. Fully intended to marry the woman when I got out of the service and came back. And we just, I missed her so much that I saved my money up and I sent her a plane ticket. And she came over. And, that was amazing. That was amazing. The generosity of women never ceased to amaze me. And that she left everything she knew and to fly over to be with me. And yes, that made living there a a lot easier on me because I had my family with me. Most of the guys don't have that. Now, she went back to school, as I said earlier, and left, and that was a trying 6 months, but I was getting out. I knew I was getting out. I was separating, so I was very enthusiastic and excited about that on a number of levels. So that time went like a blink of an eye.
How many, as you said, your parents came to see you at the airport. Did anyone else come?
No. It was just my parents, might have been my younger brother, and my wife, when I got back. It was a long time ago, Kate. I mean, you're asking me stuff about 30 years ago.
Agreed. So would you recommend if I had what would you recommend if your child went to a military?
I actually would not. I would be less than enthusiastic if either of my kids showed an interest in going in the service. When I went in, there was no wars happening. From 1975 to 1990, there was really nothing going on that the United States was involved in. And then we had the first Desert Storm, that was 1990. Given how many different conflicts we're involved in around the world, I would be less than enthusiastic about either of my kids showing a desire to go into the service. That said, Brandon did, when he was a sophomore or junior in high school, show interest that he wanted to go to Annapolis, Naval Academy, which is the toughest school in the country to get into, tougher than Harvard. If one of my kids were smart enough and had the grades to get to a military academy, that I would endorse fully. That's a different animal. That is a top flight education for free. That said, my kids have options in life that I did not. My parents were not very well off. College was not going to be an option for me on a number of levels. And I just, it was a different time, a different era, and my kids are far more fortunate in life in that we have the ability to send them to college, where my folks did not. And I've got a senior at Wentworth right now, and hopefully if Jared picks his pace up, if he picks his pace up, he's a smart kid, he just hasn't applied himself at school very well. So I'm hopeful he wants to be an engineer like his brother. And I've never seen an unemployed engineer.
Do you have anything else you would like to say?
That I'd like to say? That was a long, long time ago. I can frame it. When I was in, I couldn't say much good about the service. Once I was out, I couldn't say much bad about it. It did what I needed it to do for me. It really, it gave me structure. It taught me discipline. It taught me some life skills that have served me well to this day. So it was good for me. I needed it at the time. Would I ever consider, I'm too old now, but would I ever consider going back in? No. I did my time. And I did it, again, not for patriotic reasons, but more for financial reasons. I mean, a guaranteed job, and let's face it, you don't have to make any decisions for 4 years. All those life decisions are made for you. Where are you going to live? Where are you going to go? What are you going to do for work? all those decisions are made for you for 4 years. So it has its place. It's just more dangerous today with all the conflicts going on, that we've spread our forces around the world thinly. So it's you could still pick places, like, let's face it, you're not getting shot at in the Air Force unless you're a pilot, essentially. And so, I mean, if you pick the branch and you pick what you want to do for work wisely, the chances of ending up dead is probably very, very low. But I've done my time, and I really hope that neither of my children decide to embrace or embark on military service.
Thank you for doing the interview with us. And would you like to say anything else?
Yeah, how much did you say this was? I was getting paid?
Alright, thank
Fine, how much was it?
Not gonna
We're all
say.
good, right?
Yeah.